Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another entry in the League Encyclopedia. Today, I want to talk about why Challenger players make terrible teachers and what you can do to actually improve at the game that doesn't involve watching them. You might notice we're doing a bit of a different style today, and let me know below in the comments if you like it. But before we truly get started, I think we need to adjust just a couple of things, starting with, ooh, I like it. I think we also need to change. Hey, now we're talking. All right, let's get started. You will not make it to. Oh, wait a minute. Forgot something. Now we're ready to get started. You will not make it to Challenger. No matter how many hours of content you watch, no matter how many fundamentals you memorize, no matter how many windows of opportunity you learn to recognize, the simple truth is that we're not going to get to Challenger. Most of us will not. And that's okay. You know, for every hour that we're watching a content creator, we're not practicing, and that's totally fine. But let's trash talk some creators anyway. Have you heard of Tyler 1? Well, of course you have, but if you haven't, he's known for, well, this.
The trash! Fix the game! It sucks playing the shit!
So, Tyler doesn't really claim to be an educational channel, though, so this doesn't fully apply, perhaps. But I'm sure there are at least hundreds, maybe 200 viewers of his who started watching him, thinking that by watching him and being more like Tyler, that they would get better at playing ADC. And here we encounter our first problem. The parts of Tyler's content that make it enjoyable to watch and the parts that you can learn from are at odds with one another. See, Tyler is one of the best players in the world, and he gets upset when a player worse than him, which is most of us, makes a mistake. Because he knows that if he was the pilot in that situation, things would have ended differently. And he's probably right. However, you and I in that situation will make the same mistakes. Maybe different mistakes, but we are making mistakes. And so approaching our games with the same attitude that Tyler has for his games will stop you from thinking critically about what went wrong and what you can do to improve in that situation next time. Let's look at another creator.
Boom, what up? Solo Renekton only, back doing some more Crocodile the Scorpion action.
Known for teaching and commenting over every action he takes, especially when it comes to minion wave management. If you don't know what that is, I have a whole video on the channel you can check out to learn more, but basically, it's manipulating the position where new minion waves will crash into each other. The problem here is that in order to grasp that concept, you need to already be good at so many other aspects of League that it's hardly a fundamental part of the game. Speaking of fundamentals, what about Alois NL? He's been blown up recently, making a name for himself as Mr. Fundamentals.
And you say fundamentals? Fundamentals.
But is he actually teaching fundamentals when he plays in Grandmaster lobbies, manipulating how much XP his opponent gets, and punishes them with level up timers? Well, no. I think we can all agree that that's just like a tiny bit more advanced. I do think it's a great framing device for introducing players to a concept. By calling something you may not have known about before fundamental, he's subtly saying, hey, it's okay. You're still new to this, and if you continue watching, you'll be like me. And it works, because unlike Tyler, who gets mad, Alois can just look at the camera and say, he doesn't know his fundamentals, reinforcing to the viewer that this is the place to be to get better. But is it? Hi, I'm Robin, and welcome to the League Encyclopedia. Stick around to hear my case for why good players make bad teachers and what you can do to actually improve. It's easy to point out what isn't fundamental, like knowing when it's safe to proxy a wave, for example, but I don't want to just sit here and go through a list of all the things that aren't fundamental to the game. So let's start by defining what is fundamental. Lucky for us, it's really easy to remember as the 3 Fs. What do you think the 3 Fs are? Well, if you answered farming, fighting, and fleeing, I'll also accept flight as a correct answer. Then you would be correct. Farming is mostly about last-hitting minions. Killing a minion grants you gold. Gold can be spent on items. Items give you stats, and stats help you win fights. So by the transitive property, we can see that killing minions helps you win fights. Farming is the #1 easiest way to get out of lower elos, because you will simply start winning more fights that you probably shouldn't be winning just because you have better stats. You have more gold than the opponent. I have heard the opinion that farming makes bad players think they're better than they are, but that supposes that farming isn't an integral part of the game. Just because your mechanics are really good, if you don't have the gold income to match your opponent, chances are, no matter how sick your outplay is, you're still dead at the end of it, because you just don't have the stats for it, and you just won't win. No matter what elo you are, start small, and set meaningful but achievable goals for yourself. Maybe you average 100 CS at 20 minutes, so the next game you load up, try to get 110. I received this tip from one of my friends when I was first starting out, and I was getting like 50 CS at the time for 20 minutes, and after that reframing for myself, I was up to 100 in no time. It's amazing what it does when you think of it as more of a personal high score simulator, less of like this side thing that I have to do in the game while also fighting. I'd also recommend avoiding using your abilities to farm when you're first starting out, and instead focus on your specific champion that you're playing and just get a feel for their auto attack animation and how much damage you do to a minion. It's going to be different for every champion, of course, and whether you're building damage and attack speed is going to influence this greatly. But every champion, you need to get that feel. You need to get that intuition for how to farm with it. And then slowly you can incorporate using abilities back into farming once you're comfortable. And then you can guarantee that you're never missing a minion because you know you'll have that ability up when you need it and not just using it because you can. If you're super new to the game, you can also hover over a minion and attack a full health one and just see the damage number. And then next time you click on a minion that you want to kill, you'll see its health and you know exactly how much damage you're going to do. But it's much better to go for that intuition, for that feeling. You'll miss a minion here and there because your intuition won't be right every time and the minions do level up and you're not always going to take that into account. But for the most part, having that feeling is really what's going to push your CS numbers over the edge. For the record, having 10 CS per minute is considered optimal. It's possible to go above that even if you're being funneled resources by your team, but getting 8 CS per minute is still pretty damn good, honestly. Fighting is all about champion mastery and button mashing. Knowing the strengths and weaknesses of your own champion and how you take fights is going to make a huge difference, and preferably knowing those of your teammates and those on your opponent's side as well. There are over 130, I think, champions at this point in the game, and knowing what each of them do is frankly just a matter of time, if that. I mean, they keep adding new ones and keeping up with it can be difficult, but you could make flashcards, I guess, and you could study them and you could quiz yourself on what every champion does, but that sounds like a pretty surefire way to burn out on what at the end of the day is supposed to be a fun, enjoyable experience for all of us, so I don't recommend doing that. So I just want to make clear that what I mean by fighting is not knowing which fights you can and can't take, but rather how to take them. See, every champion has an attack pattern, and they mostly play out the same. I mean, ADCs are going to want to dodge, weave in an auto attack, dodge another threat, maybe flash over a wall, etc. But that's pretty similar among all of them. Maybe mages are a better way to illustrate this point, because the majority of the mage's value comes from their abilities, and those abilities tend to have pretty long cooldowns.
And this process starts in the pregame lobby. Start with your own champion. Take stock of what abilities you have, and think about how they should be used. What is your attack pattern? Do you have an ability that's better used defensively? If you know what your teammates as champions do the same for them. The better your understanding of how a fight will play out before it even starts, the higher is the chance that you will win, since you can start to predict what everyone will do and react accordingly. Now, if you watch a popular streamer long enough, you will find dozens of viewers asking things like, why not do that? Or why did you do that instead of this? Or why do you never build Triforce on Riven? Streamers aside, what a champion builds is always directly correlated to what their kit is trying to do. So let's examine that example of Trinity Force on Riven and talk about why it's suboptimal. First off, we see that every one of Riven's abilities scales with attack damage. so right off the bat, we know we are going to want to build high AD items. On top of that, Riven's abilities all work together to create one combo. You're not really firing off one at a time, and famously, Riven has the ability to cancel/reset her auto attack animation with her abilities, so that tells us we really don't need attack speed on her at all, pretty much. Since our ability to fight is dependent on our abilities, we're also probably going to want some ability haste. So our pattern on Riven is an all-in, where we weave auto attacks between casts, and we of course want to be alive at the end of it all, so we probably want some health. Now let's look at Triforce. It gives AD, good, we want that. It gives pretty solid ability haste as well, so that's cool. It gives attack speed, which, well, we don't really want that, but I guess it's nice to have. It gives 300 health, that's not bad. So we have 3 stats we want, and one we don't really care about. But that's not all. It also gives 2 unique passives. The first is a Sheen proc, which, yes, we can proc it pretty easily. We don't have mana, we have decently low cooldowns, but probably not more than twice in a fight, and maybe only once per combo. So that's not ideal, but let's look at that second passive. It's just Quicken, the Phage passive, which means we speed up when we hit something, which, honestly, on Riven is not super useful, since she moves around more through dashes than just plain walking. So if you want Trinity Force on Riven, you're paying for one stat you don't want, a passive you barely make use of, and another passive that doesn't synergize super well with your kit. Now keep in mind, this is one of the most expensive items in the game. Compare this to Eclipse, which most Rivens build first. It gives 25 more AD, 5 less haste, no HP, and no attack speed, but has a passive which says hitting a champion with 3 separate attacks or abilities within 2 seconds deals additional damage and grants you a shield. That sounds like it's pretty easy for Riven to proc just by playing the champion. So not only does this give us way more AD, which scales up all of our abilities including our shield, it costs 500 less gold and synergizes with our kit exceptionally well. Does this mean Triforce is a bad item on Riven? Well, no, actually, she's fine. She's a fine user for it, but there are at least 6 other items that are better. So by building Trinity Force on Riven, you are effectively losing out on those other stats. I've basically just explained the concept of opportunity cost in the context of League, so if there's any of you econ majors out there who maybe didn't get it before now, maybe this made it click. Not every champion is this straightforward, of course. Some champions do have alternate build paths and their abilities might scale with any number of stats, and that's where a little bit of personal preference can emerge too. That's not to say there isn't a mathematical optimum on each champion, but sometimes the 2 optimal builds are at odds with each other. Take Malphite, for example. His kit clearly is begging you to build armor. I mean, his passive triples it. But then his ultimate has an insane AP ratio on it, which is tempting you to go around one-shotting every ADC you see. Whatever your build is, the point here is that it's important to play around that. Tank Malphite can run around with impunity, while AP Malphite has to choose his moment very carefully, or else he becomes entirely useless. Trinity Force Riven has to space out her combo much further apart to get the most out of those Sheen procs, giving her target more chances to escape, by the way. While Eclipse Riven wants to all in and get that bonus damage and shield as quickly as possible.
Okay, admittedly, I had to force this last F to work just a little bit, but let's talk about it anyway. Just as important as knowing how to fight is knowing when to fight and when not to. So there are dozens of obvious examples of this when it comes to specific champions. Take Kayle or Kassadin, for example. Both champions are incredibly limited by cooldowns and damage before level 16 to be able to consistently win fights. So knowing that your team is either stronger or weaker later or earlier in the game can and should affect your decision making in the game.
Part of this does come back to knowing what champions do and how they scale and how they want to play out a fight. But another simpler part, which is too often overlooked, is simply asking, why are we fighting? There are a number of neutral objectives in the game that exist to entice teams to fight, but it's not required. If you think of a League game less like a collection of individual fights and objectives, and more like a chess match, this will make a little more sense. Say you have a vision of the enemy jungler and mid lane making their way to the dragon. Many players will reactively think, I need to go there now and contest that. I can't just let them have that for free. And that's partially correct. But there are more than one way to react to that information. If their mid laner is gone, that means that's an unattended turret. It also means their topside jungle is empty. Now whether or not there are any camps there for you to take is a different question, but it also means Grubs, or the Rift Herald, or even Baron are left unguarded. It also means there's no chance of top getting ganked anytime soon, or getting counter-ganked for that matter. So you see, there are over half a dozen ways you can respond to an enemy doing dragon that isn't fighting them head on. Game 5 of the MDK vs Fnatic series literally ended because MDK overcommitted to securing a dragon, and Fnatic saw that and just said, what's a dragon stack worth if your Nexus is gone?
League is a game with ebbs and flows, and learning to recognize those points of power or lack thereof will help you make much smarter decisions about which fights you can and can't take. So, to illustrate this point just a little bit, I want to play a little game.
Your Maokai and Misfortune use their ultimates and flashes in bot lane to secure a kill on the enemy ADC. Dragon spawns in 5 seconds and you have 2k gold as Jarvan jungle.
Do you fight or flight?
Your Garen top just secured a kill without using his ultimate. Their top doesn't have TP. You spotted their jungler 1 level below you making his way to contest Grubs.
Do you fight or flight?
Your Syndra mid is at half health. Their Fizz is at full health. Your Rakan doesn't have flash or ignite up. Your jungler is pinging to start the dragon, but you, as Ashe ADC, already started backing after setting up a good wave state for yourself.
Do you fight or flight?
Get in the habit of pressing tab right before you think a fight is about to break out, and take stock of 3 things. 1, ultimate cooldowns. Does everyone have theirs up? And if not, is that important? Flash timers. Does your team have flash? Does the enemy team have flash? And lastly, check items. Is there a person that's way further ahead than everyone else? Maybe there's a person that's way further behind than everyone else. Take stock of that, and it'll help you locate key targets in a fight. Before I end this video, I just want to make clear that I have nothing against any of the creators I mentioned earlier in the video. I watched all 3 of them at some point in my League career. What I do want to stress though is that watching them isn't how you improve. Practicing is how you improve. By setting meaningful but achievable goals for yourself, whether that's your CS number, your vision score, your KDA, or just the number of deaths you have in a game. Maybe you tell yourself, okay, this game I'm only allowed to die twice. And you'd be surprised what that, and keeping that in your mind throughout the entire game will do for you. You'll start to space differently because you're so worried about keeping that little high score that you set for yourself, basically. But maybe, just maybe, if you do that enough, you'll begin to see where your windows of opportunity actually are, and you can take smarter and better fights. Anyway, that's all I had for today. It's clearly a bit of a different style, but I had a lot of fun doing it this way, despite the camera troubles that I experienced. So I'm gonna try and make a few more like this and just see what it's like. Hit that like button if you liked this style to let me know. And comment down below if there's anything I missed that you think is a fundamental, and if it fits into the 3 Fs, even better, but I'll accept answers that aren't words that start with F as well. I just want to say thank you so much for watching. If you're still here, if you made it to the end, I really appreciate that. And this has been another entry in the League Encyclopedia: Why Good Players Make Bad Teachers.